do you suggest we set up as an LLC?
I mean, from a legal perspective, 1,000,000%. So 2 reasons.
Evan, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Oh, I'm terrific. Thanks, Liz, for having me.
We took some questions ahead of time, specifically around legal questions that people have for Amazon. All right, so this was actually from Anna, and she sent in a question and said, will an email with a seller/agent be considered a contract once agreed terms are binding? She has a seller agent that's refusing to uphold their end or change after the video is posted, or they wanted a change that was posted or requested after she posted the video.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Of course, in an ideal world, we'd have some type of written agreement, for each service or partnership that we go into. I don't know if you guys have templates, by the way. I can send you a template for your group if you want, anyway, that they can just use a general template for it. But ideally, there'd be some type of written agreement. The contracts don't have to be in writing to be enforceable. You could literally get on the phone and say, hey, seller agent, this is what I'm gonna get paid for doing this, this, and this, and that would be binding. However, as you can see, people have short-term memories, even in email, and they forget what the terms are. So writing's better. But to your question, yeah, and email terms are binding. So if the seller said, for example, and I don't know what they said, but I'll pay you X amount of dollars to do this video, right? And you said, great, I'll give it to you within 7 days or whatever it might be. That's a binding contract, right? Those are specific terms that they offered and you agreed on. So that's binding. If later you say, okay, can I get it to you in 9 days? I'm running behind. And they say, yes, that's great. Then the contract has been amended, and now instead of 7 days, it's 9 days. So it really depends kind of on the wording and things like that. But to answer your question broadly, ultimately an email is binding, of course. You don't have to sign it or anything like that. Those are what you agree to, just like an oral contract. Just like if you're on the phone, it'd be the same thing.
That's really good to know. I think the other thing that we see pretty often is we get a lot of agents. So, and I try and break this out for people, right? So more often than not, the people in our messages, in our inboxes are agents, not the actual brand themselves. So these are agents usually based in China, representing the China-owned brands. And their whole goal is to get as many influencers on the listings for the brands that they're repping as possible.
Got it.
And their budget, just as a standard, is somewhere between here's my product and I need this in 4 days to here's $50 and the product, right? So it's kind of it's a pretty small scale there, but most often we're working with these agents, not with the brands directly. And what we find is sometimes the agent, after the shoppable video has been posted, is either it will just ghost the influencer. And so there's a number of things that I know happen. One, either that agent is no longer working with that brand or whatever, but they have contracts in flight, or they just are trying to get out of paying it, are kind of the two. But if you had to advise an influencer on how to best move forward when one of the agents ghosts them, what would be your advice there?
Yeah, so if the agent is in China, for example, it makes it, or outside of the country, it makes it a little more difficult. Whether you had to go sue them to enforce it, you're not going to go to China, or you're not going to go to Turkey, or whatever it is, right? Depending upon how much money it is. So that's one thing to consider. But one of the good ways to do it is that if you're doing the video, you own the copyright to it, meaning that you own all of the rights to every single piece of content in that video. The images, the voiceovers, the music, you name it. So unless you transfer that to the brand or the agent, they don't have any right to use that unless you give them permission. The reason I'm saying this is you can go to wherever the platform is that the video is on and report it as copyright infringement and get it taken down. And sometimes that's a good way to do it. If the brand sees it, the brand can get in touch with the agent and then so forth, and then you can work that way. But a lot of times it's really difficult unless you get, if you're getting paid to do the videos, unless you get paid some sort of money up front to do it, it's always a risk, right? Especially if you're dealing with an agent that's outside of the country.
Right. So just curious, because based on, I think what I just heard you say is like, even if we have a contract with somebody outside the country, so one of these agents, our enforceability is probably pretty low because we're not going to go sue them in China.
Right. It's enforceable. Okay. You would just have to go enforce it probably in China.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Do you suggest we set up as an LLC?
I mean, from a legal perspective, 1,000,000%. So 2 reasons. On the money side, it's good. There's tax savings and things like that. But on the legality side, it protects your personal assets. I'll give you an example. If you're sued by Amazon, if you're sued by the brand collaborator or the agent or another content creator, just say they win $1,000 judgment, it would probably be more against you. They can collect against your personal assets if you don't have an LLC, meaning that they can come after your house, your cars, your wages, things like that. If you have an LLC and it's set up correctly, your personal assets are completely not at risk. So and I know everybody, we as small businesses, we think we're too small for that. I've had many clients that have been sued without even selling anything. It's something good to have. And then it makes you, you are a real business, but it makes you look like a real business. Yeah. So you actually can have negotiation and leverage in negotiating your deals because, you're going to say, Banana LLC, right? Versus Liz, right? Right. So, and they're going to be like, wait, this is a real business. Like they mean business. So, maybe I'll go with those terms. Maybe they're professional, things like that. So yes, ultimately LLC.
Are your protections the same if you're set up as a sole member LLC that files on Schedule C?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as everything's set up correctly, as long as you filed everything correctly, and as long as you're running your LLC, not as yourself as the LLC, but you're the owner of the LLC, meaning one way to do this is you're signing on behalf of your LLC. You're not signing on behalf of yourself. You have a separate business bank account versus personal bank account. But that's a good question. A lot of people have that question, like if I'm just a single member, am I protected? And the confusion lies with your taxes. So all of the money still flows all the way to your personal income tax return through your LLC. Yes. And I think that's where people get confused. But legally, you're protected even if you're a sole owner of that LLC.
That's actually something I've wondered for a long time. Like I am set up, I have the LLC, I'm a sole member, it files as a Schedule C, so it flows through. So I've wondered that for a while. I've never voiced it as a question anywhere.
No, it's a totally common question because you probably don't file, you just file Schedule C. It's not like you file a separate return. It's just,
I know.
Here's my net income or net loss for the year. It just goes to your personal return.
Yep.
But you can write off all your expenses, which is great. So if you're working out of your house, like most of us are, a lot of people are, you can write off a portion of your rent or your mortgage or your car payments or your utilities and, dwindle it down as much as you can.
Yeah. Great question. Thank you, Katie.
That was a good question.
Yeah. This question is from Jenna. So she said, speaking in terms of payment, not sure if this is a CPA question or a lawyer question, but let's say a seller sends us $65 product and pays us $30 to do it. Do we need to count both the $65 and the $30 as income or just the $30 because the $65 item is the supply needed to do the job?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Is the $65 included in the payment, meaning like I'm going to give you this product plus the $30 fee, or is it I'm giving you this product for free to review it and things like that? So I think you got to be clear in whatever the terms are, making sure that the $65, I would imagine you don't want the $65 product included, right?
That would be ideal.
Yeah. So I think that's how you structure it. A good accountant will be able to structure it that way too. But ultimately, like from an influence perspective, they should probably give you the product for free and then just pay you the $30. So the $30 should be the only thing that would be income at the end of the day. You can always return the product too if you don't want it, but
yeah,
I guess if you're unboxing it or doing whatever, using it, right?
Amazon has split feelings about us returning things. They don't want us to buy with intent and then return. But then in some of their surveys in the last couple months, one of the questions was, how is what are some of your biggest, challenges? And one of them was like having to return products that I'm reviewing. So it was like, okay, so they know this is happening. They don't want to, But that's really interesting around the like contracting impacting how that works, because one of the things, again, this is, I mean, it's so good to hear directly from you, because there are so many things that float in these influencer groups that like just have kind of become lore, right? Like people just keep repeating them because people say it. But one of those things is around like making sure that you're claiming the product if you're getting free product in exchange for a review. So it's interesting that if it's in the contract, it would differentiate how we claim that.
Yeah, I mean, well, you can claim it however you want, but if you got audited, for example, the contract would control. You'd say, "Hey, IRS, here's the contract. This is what was intended," and it also puts the seller or the brand on the same page too, right? They're not going to care because it's their expense is the same, right? They're going to write that off. They're not getting paid for that product, so it's for them. I think the tax consequence will be the same. I would talk to your accountant about that, but I think structuring the contract in a way each time that doesn't include $65 as income would be obviously beneficial.
And if we buy the product and do the review, I know that we don't have to claim that, right? It's just like we did a review, but if we buy with intent, there's a different way that some people do it. So Jenna's follow-up is that's usually what happens, but wanted to double check. What if you sell the product? Then do you have to track it as income? Yeah,
I mean, ultimately, it's if that's what you're normally doing too, like outside of the course of business, like if you're, I'll give you an example, people have garage sales at the end of the year and just sell stuff at their house, you're not going to claim that as income. But if you're reselling those products every time, that's a business and you'd have to claim that as income. Which, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, if you're doing well with that, then why not? But yeah, you probably have to include that as income up to a certain point.
That makes sense. Alejandro says cash he doesn't, transfers yes he has to. So that makes sense. All right, Jenna has one more around, let's see. I get conflicting information. What if we get a free product, don't pay up front, and it's commission based? Do we still count the income we make on it even though it's 15 cents?
So you're just getting commission, like you get like a percentage of the sales?
Yeah, I think, Jenna, I can actually answer this one. I think the answer is yes. Oh, I see what you're saying. Do we have to count the product? I think the answer is yes from an auditing standpoint, and I would run this past your accountant specifically because this is traceable through Amazon. And this is like, if you're getting product from Thrasio or Creator Connections, that is something that is coming through the Amazon portal or through the Thrasio portal. So I think the answer to that one is yes, that you do need to count it as income, but I would run that past your accountant just to be 100% positive on that.
And again, the other like, just I know sometimes it's tough with just every little transaction, but if you're doing, just for example, a lot of deals with Thrasio, like having that conversation up front just to say, hey, how can I benefit without having to pay income on this or taxes? I just want to make sure, and you as well, make sure we're on the same page, and then do the deal that way. But
Jenna says she's interviewing new ones and they all say different things. Jenna, I do recommend and I can send you probably a name or two. Evan, you may have somebody as well. Like, if you can find an accountant that works in the e-commerce space, just specifically, it is a whole other world. Like, we got a new CPA last year, and like when we were explaining like our different LLCs and why they're separate and what we do with them, it was like,
it's so odd. There's a handful that I've met, like maybe 5 that do e-commerce, and every time it blows my mind. I'm like, why? It's just numbers. I mean, like instead of selling services, you're selling products.
Yep. Katie says, just so I'm understanding, you were saying that unless we register the videos, we're not technically copyright protected just because we created something.
Good question, Katie. No, that's not true. So you own the copyright to it. The moment that you create the video, you own the copyright to it, like the moment that you film the thing. Registering it gives you these other benefits, right? So you're not gonna be able to go to Amazon and say, I own the copyright to this thing. They're going to say, great, show me the registration, show me the certificate. And any other platform you see your video, it might not just be on Amazon. You might see it on YouTube or Google somewhere. So you can take your registration and bring it to the platform, and they all have a process where they'll automatically delist that. That's the one benefit. And then if you had to sue, you need a registered copyright. So you are protected. You own that thing until you give it to somebody else, until you transfer it to, just say, the seller if they pay you for it, and that's part of the deal.
So from a practicality standpoint, kind of what I would take away from like this piece of it is, so there are creators in this group that do over 1,000 videos a month, right? Like these are videos that are anywhere from 6 seconds to 6 minutes, right? Like most of them live in that like 2 to 5 range, basically. But to go and do like an official registry for copyright purposes for that type of infringement enforcement feels like it would probably be a lot, right, for this. But as soon as I created the video and uploaded it to Amazon, I own the copyright and am protected. So if for some reason you took my same video and uploaded it to your influencer storefront, if I go to Amazon and just say, this is mine, I uploaded it 3 weeks ago, you can see that it should hold for being protected.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, excellent. So one of the things that I'll call out for you is unique to the Amazon influencer program is when we upload our content, we are uploading it onto Amazon specifically, right? And then Amazon places it usually on the product listing. There's a couple other places. So what we see happen is sellers or other influencers will steal our videos that are on Amazon and put them either on YouTube or upload them as a product video to the Amazon product listing, sellers, or influencers are taking those videos that we've done and basically making them their own and uploading them to their influencer account. Those are kind of the basic types of copyright infringement that we see on a daily basis. What do you think, are there like proactive ways that we could combat that? Because we're on Amazon, are we just kind of stuck? Like what do you think there?
No, I mean, absolutely. So it's copywriting so odd now. I mean, 3 years ago, we never registered any copyright for our clients. In today's world, everything we're doing is registering the copyright. So from videos to, I have clients that are coaching clients and course clients, and the entire courses are being registered. And the reason, so that's the proactive thing to do, is actually register the copyright to the content in the video. It's not that expensive. It's about $75 to $85 to do it. You can do it within 3 weeks. And I know it sounds like a lot because you might have 20 videos a month or whatever it might be. But the benefits of doing that are, if you have the registered copyright, you can go to Amazon and say, here's my registered copyright for this video. They're not using it appropriately, take them down. And that's one way you can do it. The other thing you can do, if you had to sue somebody for that, you need to have the registration. So those are the two main benefits to doing that. That's one of the ways that quickly you can get Amazon to take them down. Well, I shouldn't say that. Amazon's not that quick sometimes, but a lot of times it's hit or miss with Amazon, but it's one way to do it. You can, of course, you could send, if you have the registered copyright, you can send cease and desist and demand letters to the other influencer as well. That works if those people unintentionally stole the video. And that happens sometimes. They'll say, well, I thought it was fair use or whatever it might be, right? So then that would work. But if these are just bad people, which some of them are, they're not going to care. It's so hard too, because it's the amount of effort that you guys put into the videos, and to see somebody else using it is awful. But if you can think in your mind that they're not going to be around for that long, right? If they're doing that, they're lazy and there's no way they're going to be around for that long. That's kind of also a good way to think of it too. I know it's not legal, but it's just kind of the way, like, you put in the work, you do the work, you'll survive them, right? But at the same time, it's frustrating.
Yeah. I think about that a lot, which is like, as hard as it is to watch people do things black hat, gray hat, whatever the case is in Amazon, is at some point Amazon's going to take them down. And I'd love to hear kind of your perspective on this, is kind of what I was alluding to earlier. Like, one of the things that we historically have seen is not that Amazon goes in and does a fantastic job of like one at a time enforcing their terms of service. Like, it's not usually like, oh, I uploaded this video, the AI caught it, and then they told me my account was suspended, right?
Right.
What they normally do, or, like thinking of terms of service around written reviews when it changed in October of 2016, was then we would just see these broad sweeps where like overnight, huge swaths of reviews would disappear, right? Because they
Yep.
deemed them not terms of service compliant. Have you seen any changes to that? Do you think that will change, or do you think that it's going to kind of stay that way for the foreseeable future for our content as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way that Amazon operates. I think they play a catch-up game. So if you look at what's the goal of Amazon, right, to make as much money as possible, how do they do that with their customers? How do they do that pleasing their customers? And what they're trying to avoid with all of these tactics is deception and making if you have one bad review and the customer says, well, I bought this and then I didn't think it was this, I thought it was from this seller, whatever it might be. Or I watched this influencer video, but it wasn't on this product, whatever. So that's what they do, but it takes them a long time to catch up, right? So all of I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the influencer side of it is fairly new, right? I mean, the way that it's operating now with the content and the videos, which is great.
Yeah.
But there probably will be some sort of sweep if they're seeing that there's a lot of, bad influencers that are deceiving customers and making fake videos or things like that. In another little niche in Amazon, we're seeing that now with drop shipping, so which is illegal with the terms of service, but there's all these, we talked about this before, Liz, but all these Lamborghini, people out there that are flashing their fake Lamborghini saying, I'll make you, pay me $50,000, I'll make you this. And they try to drop ship and then they're all shut down. And there was a big sweep of that, and it's still going on right now. So I think the best way that you can do it is just be honest and don't deceive the customers, and that will abide by the terms of service as much as possible. So if you're acting in good faith, I think that's what Amazon cares about. Now sometimes you get caught up in their software sweep, but at the end of the day, being able to appeal that with how you're operating versus somebody else that is not operating well or in a good faith manner is the way to do it. And I think that's how you survive it.
Yeah, I agree. Do you represent people, whether influencers or sellers, who have been kind of caught up with appeals to their accounts being suspended ever?
I have, yeah. It's one of the most frustrating. I do it a lot, and it's one of the most frustrating areas that I help with because a lot of times, I'll be honest with you, it's hit or miss. It's not like anybody has a representative at Amazon they can just call and say, look, here's this. I mean, we can appeal it to the lawyers and eventually it could get to that. But at some point, the cost of that and the time of that, your account's gone, and the answer is yes, we do a lot. But it's my least favorite area to work in just because of that, because it's so frustrating, because most of the time my clients have not done anything wrong to get delisted or whatever it might be. And it's hard to explain that, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to explain that you're literally dealing with a machine.
Yeah.
But
interesting.
Not trying to be a downer. This is supposed to be happy, good legal stuff. You guys are doing awesome. You're not going to get killed by Amazon. It's fine. Sorry.
I actually do have a couple comments that have come in that I wanted to share with you. So Kurt said yes, and I think also Lori agreed that a general template for agreements with the agents would be incredibly helpful. So a couple comments around that. That would be amazing. And then Kurt has a question here. Is there a time frame you need to register the copyright, or can you register after a problem happens?
Yeah, great question. You can register it after. So before you actually publish the video to Amazon, you can actually register up to, or I should say apply for registration up to 10 videos in one application. Okay. So one application fee. So in an ideal world, you'd register them before you publish it. That's just, the reason being is, number one, it's quicker. Number two, it would be cheaper for you. But you can register it at any time. The only time frame that matters is if you did have to sue because of copyright infringement, you'd have to register it within a specific time of finding out that, I think it's 3 months off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact date, of finding out that they infringe, which is, it's a long enough period to do that. So that's the only time frame that you can do it. It's not like a patent where you have to register your patent before you advertise the product and sell it, but copyrights you can do anytime, like trademarks. That's
really helpful. I think one of the things that we see posted a lot in the groups that are talking about trying to copyright protect all of our content is people have started creating, like I have one, for this purpose, a YouTube channel where I'm not doing anything other than just uploading all of my Amazon shoppable videos so that they live somewhere, because there is a sentiment that like that will help us copyright protect both on and off Amazon. Is that something that is accurate? Like, is that something you recommend as a good practice for us?
To copyright before YouTube, or to what?
Sorry, to put it on YouTube as a way to increase copyright protection. So not filing or registering like you've been talking about, but specifically people are creating these channels to help copyright proof, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's from a legal perspective, proof wise, it's not adding anything, but it will add from a practical standpoint. It's you could say like, hey, Amazon, here's my YouTube channel with it, right? That helps. But if you had to, like, legally, if you had to go sue or anything like that, it doesn't matter. It's really, here's my application for the registration, or here's when I used it, right? You get copyright rights the moment that something comes out of your mind, like the moment that you're like, oh, here's a video idea, and you start recording it. That's the moment that you get the copyright to it. Okay. By law. You can take it further by registering it. That's the time that you own it. Like the easier example might be like, if I'm painting a painting, the moment that like I start, taking the brush and brushing it on the painting, the canvas, is when I own it. But yeah, I think it's a good for business purposes to do it on YouTube, but I think legally it could help. I mean, practically from YouTube's or Amazon's perspective. Yeah. And then anybody else, I mean, you could, if you have the good people that unintentionally took your video, you could say, here's my YouTube channel. I posted the video on, October 1st, whatever. Obviously I've owned it for that long. I think YouTube has pretty good copyright protections kind of like built in as well. So if somebody uploads your exact video, you can flag and all those things. So I think in addition to like trying to help what's going on in Amazon, like people do it so that it lives somewhere, again, dated, like you just said. So yeah, YouTube has like, they have their own algorithm that they use for copyright claims. And then there's a copyright strike, which a third party can send in and say, there's using my copyright. Yeah, I think Amazon had that for a little bit where we could say basically like this is copyright infringement. But I saw yesterday somebody post that it was like grayed out for some reason in their form. So actually one of the members in our group, Logan, at one point had like a Google form or like a fillable form for everybody that like basically was like, these are the things that Amazon needs in order to like take down a video that somebody has stolen from you, because it's very specific, right? Like they have these very specific things that they want from you, and instead of going back and forth with them in email support chat, which we know how that can take a lot of time, it was like one form at one point. So how do you guys monitor it? How do you constantly monitor to see if your videos or any other content is up on Amazon? So we have a couple ways. Like right now, most people are doing like manual monitoring of their own placements. So like clicking through their videos to their product listings to see if they still have placement. So there's that side of it. But honestly, from the copyright standpoint, you would have to go in and like check every listing to see if your video is there with somebody else's name on it. So it's a pretty manual process. I actually asked my development team what it would take for us to create a monitoring system. They were like, we would have to scrape like every page of Amazon every day. And then create like a data. I mean, like when they explained it to me, they were like, this would take so much storage and so much space that it was like, okay, so. You're like, go do it. I was like, what does that cost? I don't know if we're there yet. But the other thing that we do is there is kind of like some camaraderie amongst influencers, the same as the seller world, where like, if somebody finds a page that clearly has a lot of stolen content, people will post the page in one of the public groups and be like, found a page of stolen influencer content. Make sure you check and see if any of your videos are on here. So people do a lot of like just information exchange to help each other out, because it's almost impossible to like monitor because there's so many places they could post. And I love that. That's great. Yeah.
Evan, Amazon is like a constantly changing phenomenon, but are there any kind of like overarching takeaways from your 7 years now in Amazon specifically? If you were going to give people who are creating content that is going to live on the Amazon platform that like kind of comes to mind where you're like, these are some things that I would be aware of and be careful of.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, I think I mentioned it a little bit before about what Amazon's ultimate goal is. And I don't think that's ever going to change, and it's money. And the only way they get money is with more and more customers buying their stuff. And if the customers lose faith in what they're buying, which does happen, of course, then Amazon's going to lose money. They're going to make changes. That's what happened with the reviews, the big review switch. And I think that's, if you can keep that in your mind with creating content, that's number one. Number two, don't be deceptive. Make it your own original content. Make it truthful. Don't harm the products, yada, yada, yada. But we also have this new sweeping AI coming in, right? Which Amazon's jumping into it also. So we'll see what happens with that. That's a whole nother animal, how we're going to start to use that. And I'm sure you guys might use that for inspiration. And that's what you should use it for if you're using it for inspiration. There are programs out there that are going to pick AI content up and unoriginal content. Amazon, I'd imagine, is going to implement that or implement its own software at some point into their system. And if they see it, that's just another flag. So when we're using AI, use it as inspiration. Don't just take the actual video script or whatever it might be, and that's it. For two reasons. Number one, it can be owned by somebody else. And number two, even if it's not, you will never get a copyright to it. Right. So the information that is spit out from AI right now is not copyrightable, which means that you can't own it and you can't prevent anybody else from owning it or using it. That's right. That's in today's world right now.
Interesting.
The Copyright Office said that. So that's the other thing, tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, using it for inspiration. But I think not deceiving the customers, of course, and being careful with how we use AI to create this content right now.
That's really interesting. I'm glad you said that. I forgot that I had this from our earlier conversation specifically around AI, just around like what use cases you think are good. So I actually have a follow-up question to what you just said, because there are people, right, who are trying to automate this, right? And so make shoppable videos, but from AI, where like the AI is writing the script. And then also now, of course, we have voices where you can basically the AI reads the script in a pretty human sounding voice.
Yeah.
And then you're just doing basically voiceover work on footage that might be also AI generated, or maybe I have B-roll footage that I'm just using the AI to voice over. You think Amazon's going to basically sweep all that AI off at some point?
I do. I mean, I not like an entire sweep, but if it's going to see that you used AI with some sort of percentage, right? And they may say if you use our AI, it's fine, right? That's Amazon.
Yeah.
They'll create their own thing. But yeah, I think that they're going to, if they start to see that people are, for example, returning products or they're leaving bad reviews because of associated content like that, then I think they will. It's hard to really understand what is AI generated and what is not.
Yeah.
As far as what am I inputting into the thing versus am I just copying it, that kind of thing. So it's okay to use the voiceover and the B-roll, but just double check it. Make sure that it's original content. I mean, you can put it in the script in Google or in a plagiarism checker and just make sure that it doesn't pull up from somewhere else. I mean, that's the easiest way to do it for right now.
Yeah, when you brought up AI initially, I was like, oh yeah, that's big and now people are using it. We should know that. Yeah. Right now, my number one use for Chat GPT, which I realize is the easiest form of AI right now between all of the other generative AI advances being made, but I'll take one of my videos and feed the transcript into Chat GPT and ask it for a summary of what I said to create a YouTube description or
awesome.
Those sorts of things. So I assume that since I'm feeding my basically spoken content into it, that I would own that copyright. Okay.
Yeah, and I use it all the time too. It's just it's just trying not to. It's hard to not get caught up in how easy it is, right, to use it. So it's. I'm not saying don't use it. I love it.
Oh yeah.
It's just that's something to be aware of. I think that might be something easy for Amazon to do if it starts to get out of control.
Yeah. So I have a question for you then too around that. Like, there are a couple services floating ideas around, like they're going to take the AI to summarize things on the page and create bullet points or do this or, but then that somebody would actually read it or put into it. Would that fall into your category, you think, of like using it to like brainstorm, or does that kind of cross that line for you? You feel like where if they're creating bullet points or basically summarizing the page, that's no longer your voice per se?
Yeah, I think things like that are okay. I mean, you can't copyright everything. I mean, the easy example for copywriting like words is a book, the entire book. But if I'm doing like bullet points, you can't necessarily copyright lines. It's just not unique enough or comprehensive enough. So I think there's kind of a fine line to that. I think that would be okay though.
Okay.
From that perspective, yeah, I think summarizing and doing the bullet points would be fine. It's for me too. It's like, so I look at it like again in two different lenses. Number one, taking somebody's stuff. Am I violating their content? And then, do I care if it's protected? Do I care if somebody else takes it? And in all reality, like bullet points and things like that, you might not care as much if somebody else takes that versus your video, or that you spend time on. So it's just a risk level. I mean, we can't. Again, I don't want this to be like a downer, but I think that's just my prediction. Hopefully, it's wrong.
Well, what is it? I heard somebody say like, use all of the AI you can. It's currently kind of like the Wild West, and be like wildly conservative or something like that. They were like, you balance those two pieces of every time there's new tech like this that kind of comes out. It's like you want to be on the cutting edge because that's where it's going to be, and you want to be as careful as you need to be for whatever industry you're in. So, so Lori says, I've used ChatGPT for a few video headlines, but tweaking a bit. Definitely need to watch that, right? Actually, Lori, I think that's like the perfect way to use it.
I think that's okay. I do it for YouTube, my YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So it's, I think that's totally fine.
Yeah. I try to make as many things that I send out banana themed to go with Fluencer fruit, right?
Yeah.
And I have ChatGPT write all of them. And I usually will be like, give me 10 options, then I'll combine like 2 or 3 of them is usually the way it ends up like being the best. So
yeah, I think that's totally fine. It'll just be interesting what Amazon comes up with if they're going to, how they'll flag. Flag that for sure. I think what'll happen is people are just going to automate listing. I don't even know if they do it right now, but like a complete AI automated listing where it's literally the AI running the entire thing. I think that is going to probably be not too far down the pipe people are going to do, and I think that's where Amazon's going to get concerned about. But
so Jungle Scout, as an example, has an AI assist tool in it. Have you seen this?
I've heard about it. I haven't seen it though.
Okay, so like if you go into the back end and you have all of your keywords for your product and everything, like they programmed it so that like if you click on the title button, it will put together like a keyword optimized title with the constraints of like best practices for your product title. And then you can do it for all 5 of your feature bullet points as well. It will do it. Now, it's sometimes like most AI needs like some tweaking, right? Like sometimes it doesn't make as much sense as you want it to, but they've done a decent job of like programming so that it's about as automated as you could make it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's great. So I'm not saying that all AI takes other people's content. It's just a matter of checking it, right? So like ChatGPT is just, I don't know all the AIs, or every platform has it now, but they take a lot of other people's content, mash it up, and then, it's just what they know. So it's just a matter of checking to make sure that is original. I think where the like the art ones is where it gets a little hairy. Like that's where people are starting to like create this thing using like Van Gogh's style or whatever it might be. I think that's where it's getting a little too close, but
they're fun to see.
Oh yeah.
To your point,
we'll
probably
put
not content that we want to try and upload and own.
Yeah, exactly.
Lori says that she's seen the accounts doing all AI content and influencer, and they're bad. Like, they're doing scripts, AI voice, even the person is AI generated, and they're not good yet. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I can see that their YouTube channel is just like that too. It's awful.
Yeah. Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining us. And I really appreciate the offer for like a template for contracting with agents and the offer to continue answering questions. All right, everybody have a good Thursday.